This is Matthew Cratter from Trader University, and today I want to talk about Trudeau, the truckers, and Bitcoin. Canada really has been running one of the best commercials for Bitcoin over the past few weeks that I've ever seen. Here you have a first world country that pretends, or at least is pretending to be a liberal democracy, doing its best to control and silence a huge percentage of its population. And whether you agree with the protesters and the truckers or not is really beside the point. This is about a large group of people who are trying to make their voice heard, and they're being silenced. And we've really seen in the last couple of days, we've seen the mask of benevolence come off to show the face of raw power. What Trudeau originally called a fringe minority in an effort to downplay these protests has turned into a flood. As a result, he has done a very cowardly thing and invoked the Emergencies Act as a way of having the optionality of calling in the military, of violating people's basic protections under the law, and freezing bank accounts, putting people in prison, canceling insurance licenses and driving licenses, etc. And I would ask Trudeau why he did this. The basic quote was, "This is about keeping Canadians safe, protecting people's jobs, and restoring faith in our institutions." Unfortunately, all the institutions have really taken a hit across all the major North American and European countries over the past few years because of the really bizarre way that things have been handled. And I would ask Trudeau, why in the world would you invoke war measures on what is mostly a peaceful protest? This seems like incredible overkill. Why in the world would you start freezing bank accounts and labeling ordinary citizens terrorists as if they're money laundering in order to carry out some form of violence? Of course, you'd only do this if you were extremely desperate. And then there's this other thing. Trudeau really does have a history of admiring authoritarian regimes like China. Just a couple years ago, he talked about, this is a quote from Trudeau himself, "There's a level of admiration I actually have for China. Their basic dictatorship is actually allowing them to turn their economy around on a dime." I would say, in my opinion, Justin Trudeau really is a little worm of a man, but he's a worm of a man with large dictator dreams. And he's not alone in this. I would say that all the Western countries really do have a case of envy when it comes to China and are quite jealous of China's digital panopticon, their social credit scoring system, and the power it gives them to bypass laws and to just rule and mandate whatever they want. And this is unfortunately what we're moving towards in the West, I believe, and we'll talk about it. But for now, Justin Trudeau's hero really is Winnie the Pooh. We've seen in the last few days, we've seen a Canadian judge freeze access to donations for these truckers and the protest. They first put a stop to GoFundMe, then they put a stop to Give, Send, Go, which is another version of a crowdfunding service. Trudeau has been vowing to freeze the protesters' bank accounts, and this is probably already happening. It already happened to two individuals 3 days ago, when TD Bank froze the accounts of two individuals, two personal bank accounts into which 1.1 million had been deposited to support the protesters. I would say that in my mind, this is really no different from the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP, freezing Hong Kong protesters' bank accounts. Banks in Canada now can freeze your account, no court order required, and without any legal liability. They've been given full legal immunity under this act. And they can do this just because they might have some suspicions about you and what you think about the mandates or what you think about the protesters. All I would say is, if you're watching this, if you're from Canada, if you live in Canada and you don't have any money in Bitcoin, now might be the time to move some of that money out of your government-controlled bank account and into Bitcoin. At some point, this is no longer going to be a luxury. This is going to be a necessity, especially when the central bankers roll out their central bank digital currencies, their CBDCs. These will allow governments and central banks to really turn off your money at the flip of a switch. In other words, your money isn't really yours if you speak against us, as long as you support the regime. And this is how it is in China. As long as you support the regime, you're able to move around the country, you're able to have a good job, you're able to access your bank account. But as soon as you start to critique or criticize the regime, these basic things get frozen. And this is fundamentally the problem with money in a bank account. It's only yours if the government and the bank allow you to access it. And when you most need it is when they're probably not going to let you access it. By contrast, we have bearer assets that don't have any counterparty risk. They can't be turned off or frozen. Gold used to be the great version of this. Unfortunately, gold is very difficult to move around. You can try moving gold over the Canadian-American border. It's not going to work very well. Bitcoin is the modern version of gold. It's a bearer asset, doesn't have the counterparty risk, can't be turned off or frozen by anyone. So I would say it's important for all of us to start making ourselves uncancelable. And you never know whether you're on the left, whether you're on the right, whether you're in the middle. Depending who's in power, you can be canceled. And you can be canceled very easily because in the digital age, the state no longer needs to send out men with guns to put you in a box. Instead, with a flick of a switch, by applying pressure to internet providers and social media providers and email providers, etc., and banks, they can freeze your bank account, they can revoke your license, and they can cancel your online presence. And they don't even need to go before a judge or court to do this. So these are extraordinary powers that we don't want our governments to have. And I think at some point it's not going to be this question. People are always asking me, is the price of Bitcoin too high? Is this a good point to buy it, etc.? I don't think it's going to be a question of whether you want some Bitcoin and whether you think the price is too high or not. I think at a certain point, everyone in this decade is going to need some Bitcoin. And this is why there's this tremendous pent-up demand for Bitcoin. In terms of the price of it, if you're in the middle of a desert, what's the right price to pay for a glass of ice water? This is really what Bitcoin is. It's a glass of ice water in a corrupt fiat system where your identity can always be frozen and your bank account can always be frozen. In terms of making myself less cancelable, I am mirroring my YouTube videos over here at Odyssey, so you might want to bookmark this. Of course, there's a Trader University website you can access at any time. I do have an account on Telegram, though I'm not very active there, but you might want to just file this away for the future at Matt Cratter. And then, of course, there's the Trader University email list. I'll stick a link in the description notes below. You can sign up for this so we can stay in touch in case something goes wrong. I think there's a lot of gaslighting happening here as well. Here's an article from the CBC talking about trying to denigrate the word freedom and say basically the concept of freedom is a far-right concept. This is just pure gaslighting. The freedom is something that's available on the left and on the right. This is what we mean by liberal democracy, or one thing we can mean by that. That's a form of freedom. So beware of this war on language that George Orwell warned us about. It's definitely happening right now. I would agree here with the Canadian Civil Liberties Association, basically arguing in this tweet, which I'll link to below, that the federal government of Canada has not met the threshold necessary to invoke the Emergencies Act. And this really shows what a petty little dictator Justin Trudeau is. This is not something where the whole Canadian government is a threat or there's some revolution or overthrow. These are peaceful protests protesting various obvious mandates. So I would agree here that this is just incredible government overreach, and it will have the effect of really driving people, polarizing people more, and driving them against their government, because when that mask of benevolence comes out and you see the face of raw brutality and power, in many ways it's a very good thing, and it's very bad for the Canadian government. Canadian government also trying to cut off protesters' access to cryptocurrencies as well, in particular Bitcoin. Unfortunately, this is going to fail. They can do some crackdowns on some of the crowdfunding platforms and some of the registered Bitcoin payment providers, but you cannot stop peer-to-peer Bitcoin or Lightning transactions to and from non-custodial wallets. So one wallet I would encourage everyone to check out, especially Canadians, is the Moon Wallet, MUUN.com. This is a really cool self-custodial wallet, so no one else is holding your keys, no one else is controlling your Bitcoin, you control it, and you can use it to send both on the base layer of Bitcoin as well as across the Lightning Network. And it makes it really, really easy to use. You can download it for Android or iOS. If you found this video helpful, be sure to hit that subscribe and like button. Hit the notification bell if you want to be notified when I publish my next video. And let me know your questions and comments in the comment section below. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.